Hey guys, so we're gonna have a pretty short. It'll probably be a pretty succinct meeting update tonight. We don't have a ton to talk about, but we just wanted to pop in, give you guys a quick update of what's been going on the past couple weeks since our last meeting, and just rehash the milestones that we've kind of laid out and give you guys a status update there. So the main thing that we've been working on as far as the releases go is working on CI jobs for the static site and doc deployments so that will be automated along with the rest of our release process. Mike is still working on getting all the credentials from the former team and consolidated into one password for us. So that'll be necessary once we have to do any driver deployments to npm or Ruby gems or anything like that. We had a lot of users submitted PRs and bug fixes that were submitted and merged this past couple weeks. ATN's been on top of that the last week or so. I've been a little bit busy moving, but he's been holding down the fort for us. We definitely appreciate all the activity. We, as always, thanks to the contributors for hanging with us and continuing to submit useful feedback and bug fixes. It definitely helps us out. The big one, ATN merged his web UI changes, which he had. I think you'd split out all the web UI into a separate repo initially, right?
That's correct, and I merged back the changes that seemed worth merging.
Yeah, so I think we're still kind of considering splitting it out into a fully separate repo, and we can do that now that we own the GitHub org. But yeah, for now. Those changes are mainly for improving the local development experience, right? Is that right, ATN? The purpose was just to kind of improve the development process locally, right? I think you're muted.
Hopefully fix some bugs along the way, but yes,
yeah.
Improve the development process.
Cool. Do you want to talk about any of the PRs that you merged this past week or two?
Yeah.
Hey, Sam.
What's happened this past week? So some changes were merged to the web UI. It caused a few breakage to the build. Sorry about that, Sam. And we had a few contributions too. Someone added a link to the Rust driver to the README. Sam, you merged two fixes to the migrations for 2.4. And there was something else, but I can't find it. So it's a slow week, but I think the meeting last week kind of reinvigorated some of us, and we're excited to be working on this a bit more again.
Yeah. So the other one was we had a PR to the logstash input RethinkDB repo. I think you said that there were new credentials options in Elasticsearch 2.3. So we have support for that. We still are waiting to get the credentials from Mike before we can actually publish the Ruby gem there, which is the same problem that we have with releasing the drivers right now. So as far as the 2.3.6 point release goes, I think the only holdup there is that we need to generate new GPG keys to sign the release binaries. But I think from a CI perspective, we're good to go there. ATN, you mentioned that we have to update some documentation stuff and a couple other bookkeeping things. I think there's a couple couple things we need to add to the release notes. A few PRs have been merged since we tagged that first RC for 2.3.6. So I think our plan is to tag RC2 just so that we can incorporate those new changes. So we'll do that in the next day or two, and then we'll look at getting 2.3.6 actually released next week.
Yep, I think you summed it up pretty well. The only changes are documentation and I think changing the licenses in some of the folders.
That's right.
And then we can package it, do a final test, and then release the final 2.3.6.
Yep, and then as far as the 2.4 release goes, we're still blocked on that one issue related to what to do about r.now in certain contexts. Sam, did you want to talk about that at all anymore? I think we haven't had a ton of discussion since our last meeting in that thread. But did you have any plans to work on it here pretty soon, or are you busy with other stuff? Sam, are you there? Well, I guess we'll just keep chugging on that. I think Daniel Muse had a bit of feedback, but I haven't chatted with him since our last meeting.
There was some feedback, but I think there was a solution that was pretty much most people liked, which was to have a write context object, I believe.
Oh, so
welcome back. Talk about the issues left for 2.4 for the
regarding the right hooks one. I think there's basically, the question: should it be should it use should it use r.now? Should it use r.write timestamp? Should it use a context object? Should it use some kind of special context object?
Yeah, I think as far as I can tell, there's general consensus around using a context object. I don't know if that context object would like vary in certain contexts, which I think is what you were saying as your last point there.
No, I mean, it would. There's two questions. Would it be a context object that's just a plain object, or would it be one that has like functions you can call on it that are special, like a special object?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like, how time objects are in some way a special object.
Right.
Like you can call time-specific functions. And I think me and like Lucy, for what it's worth, is like an agreement on how that should be, and maybe there was other disagreement by Daniel or something.
You, Mike, Lucy, and me, I like that solution as well. I think we should go forward with it.
I mean, I just don't really feel like implementing like some sort of deranged new concept. It's not actually deranged, but it's like you'd have to implement it. And that being objects that have special methods just because you think that's cleaner or something, which I sort of do. But you then have to teach everybody how to use that. And that would just be like a new thing that people have to learn just to use right hooks.
Right. So are you thinking that each like value on that context object would really be implemented as a separate term, and it would be up to the client driver to either wrap that in like a like nested under a context object, or just expose them at the top level, right? Like, would there be anything special about that context object, or would that purely be client side?
So that's the question. Well, it wouldn't be client side. If it were special, it would not be client side. They send a REQL term to the server and it would evaluate that term. Because otherwise, like, you could imagine having some client side function that gets the field out of the object, but like, that's like a kind of, you could just get the field using the field access method. And then, they'll look at the debug value of the object and see the field there, so they'll start accessing it by that and be wondering, should I use a special function or should I just get the field? So anyway, I think like the basic downside of having it not be a special object is that you'd sort of like to prevent people from assuming that there's a particular set of fields and no other fields. You don't want them to start merging the object into others or something like that, because the future version of RethinkDB might have more fields in the object. Like, I don't know what it would be, like some sort of some sort of informational field about how the server's feeling that morning.
Yeah,
like
basically, we want to be able to change the values that are represented in that context object without people worrying about how it gets merged in.
But it's not particularly, like, I'm not really worried about that, because it's not something that's a backwards compatibility issue where it's you can always evaluate a right hook with with secondary indexes. We have special code to handle running old indexes with old implementations of the functions that are broken, because they have to maintain exact the same behavior until you've actually created a new index. But we don't have to worry about that with right hooks. Like, if somebody has code that merges in the context object and gets the ID and right timestamp field, and if some new fields get added, that's kind of their fault.
Right.
And they'll have to deal with it by installing a new right hook. And it's not really that big a deal. Like it could be documentation saying, just get the fields of this object, please.
Right. So do you have a strong preference on one way or the other there?
Well, I would say just get the fields on the object, because that's just brain dead simple to implement. It doesn't require, new concepts. And I think, users aren't going to, the users are going to have to deal with understanding the ideas of what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
If it were the other way.
Okay, so I think just to wrap up here, we had some questions from the community. One was just about getting Requel Pro added as a third-party admin tool. So we'll definitely look into that. That shouldn't be a problem. As soon as we have the CI stuff set up for deploying the static site. We also have to talk to Mike about that, because there's been some changes made to the static site that aren't reflected in the repo. So if we deploy, we'll blow away those changes. But we should be able to get that done here pretty soon. The other one I'm going to have to look into for a second. So we had a question from Ruben Calevra, who was asking if RethinkDB is suitable for analyzing statistical data. And I think RethinkDB is suitable for analyzing any kind of data, but it kind of depends on the operations that you're trying to perform. It's certainly not super well optimized for like massive data sets where you're trying to compute like a huge map reduce on millions of rows. You'll probably get better performance out of like a more specialized tool like Redshift or something. But I mean, for reasonably sized data sets, you should be able to do pretty much anything that you want to do. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of don't know what people do with statistical data. I'm kind of just sort of ignorant about that in general, other than like a sort of like pure math sort of way. But I'd imagine it feels like a lot of stuff about dealing with statistical data would involve using like mathematical functions that RethinkDB doesn't have built in for some reason.
Right.
Like you'd imagine, like a normal distribution or something, or like, I don't know, like something like that. Like, being able to compute like e to the x or something, e to the negative x. Like that, you sort of think that like that might be useful. I don't know.
Yeah. So if the question is targeted at, do we support specific statistical operations like like getting the standard deviation for a set of values, or any like statistical properties like that. We don't have RethinkDB doesn't support anything like that. You can just look in the documentation at the mathematical operations that RethinkDB does support, which is like stuff like sum, average, those sorts of things. But I think there's a couple issues about supporting more statistical operations, but we probably wouldn't be able to address these anytime soon.
It does support some of them, like you can do exponentiation and square roots using r.js, and it's not obvious from the docs. And adding such operations to be more optimized would be like a good starting point for someone who wants to contribute, because it wouldn't be too hard.
Mm-hmm. Can you create like secondary indexes using r.js?
No, because it's not deterministic.
No.
Oh, right.
And you wouldn't. Well, I guess the current state of things is you're supposed to run RethinkDB, your cluster, on everything with the same architecture. But there is like questions of what if you update your glibc or some math library, and then you run sin of x or e to the x or something, and you could get a different result. And that could be that's the problem with having transcendental functions in a secondary index if we're supposed to support old indices.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if we didn't want to support old secondary indices when upgrading or something like that, and we just sort of say, hey, like that might, it might be nice to give users that capability. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I know. I haven't seen that issue pop up in a while, but I know, like a year or two ago, lots of people were requesting additional statistical functions. Okay, so the last one from the same guy was wondering if we would support SCTP for cluster connections. I think it's unlikely that we would get around to that anytime soon, and also, like in theory, your TCP should get the job done. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sam?
I'd love to implement SCTP. Like that'd be really cool. Like
yeah.
Like if you want it, maybe I don't know. That'd be pretty neat. Maybe send me an email writing an essay why you want SCTP, and like.
There you go, and Sam will reward you with a PR.
Or maybe a price quote. I don't know.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, one thing that would be kind of nice is, like for a lot of stuff, it would be, getting dragged behind TCP, like from the client and whatnot, or just like you're stuck waiting behind other stuff.
Right.
And it would be nice if we, a lot of circumstances, it would be nice if we, if not SCTP, like had like UDP packets for certain things, like in certain kinds of inter-cluster messages. Because everything's designed around out of order transmission anyway, in terms of the cluster networking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I wonder what kind of throughput gains we would actually see. Do you imagine it would be significant?
I'm not really qualified to. I mean, that would be situational, I guess.
Yeah. I think that about wraps it up for the questions that we had. I'm just gonna check YouTube really quick to see if anybody commented. Yeah, I think we're good. Did you guys have anything you wanted to wrap up with? Any other thoughts? Things we should bring up?
Well, so once we get for right hooks, my computer just crashed, so I don't know. I can't see. Is there anything else we need for 2.4? I don't think there's much left.
No, yeah, I don't think there's much left at all. I think it's just deciding on that RFC and then getting an implementation together. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like we have pretty good consensus on that too. I'm happy with everything that you brought up, Sam. I think all your points are valid. I think just doing it as a standard, object expression makes a lot of sense. Because I think despite the fact that people might get bitten by merging that object in the context of a right hook, I think like the power of being able to treat it as any other expression object is worth it. Because I think that's the behavior people would expect. Cool.
I have a quick shout out that's not necessarily RethinkDB core related, but at least in the Kubernetes world, I want to shout out to Cody Lundquist, who's at Meanie on GitHub. He built a Helm chart for easily deploying RethinkDB to Kubernetes. So he basically took some of the scripts that I built for managing Rethink in Kubernetes, and he's made it part of the Helm sort of Kubernetes app store. So thank you, Cody.
Sweet. That's awesome. Okay, I think that about wraps it up for tonight. We'll have our next meeting in a couple weeks, and if everything goes according to plan, we should have at least 2.3.6 out by then, and we should either have 2.4 basically ready to go, or we'll still be working on the implementation of R.now in the context of right hooks. But thanks for everybody for hanging out with us tonight, and we'll catch you guys in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thanks, Marshall.